Hi everybody, it's Wayne and Gabrielle Enright here from Free Spirit True North. Welcome back to the second of our webinar sessions on wellbeing as we go through this time of change and transformation really and move into a new normal. So this session we're going to have a look at what's working, what's not working and how we can respond within our circle of influence. Maybe having a look at how we can reframe the way we think, live and work, and also how we can manage our energy and our time and perhaps set some intentions for the next week or the next period of time that we want to focus on changing the way we do things. The first thing we're going to do though, as has become customary for these sessions, is just to stop, to pause, to take a moment unapologetically to just be still. And that place of stillness is a place of refreshment where we can regroup and allow our nervous system to calm and focus and come back to its parasympathetic state, the rest and digest, and have not flipped our lid but be in a state of calm to make good decisions. So we're just going to take some time now to connect with our breath. So if it works for you to allow your eyes to close, then do that. Otherwise, just have a look at the picture. And if you find your mind wandering, that's fine. It's not about trying to control the mind. It's about being still and bringing our attention and our awareness to the present time. So as you sit in the chair, just become aware of your feet on the floor or on the chair, whatever position they're in, your legs and buttocks supported by the chair and your back, and your arms, whether they're resting on the desk or on the chair or in your lap. And bring your awareness to your breath as it comes in and out of your body. Just notice the breath moving in and out. Notice what parts of the body move while you're breathing. Relax the belly, the chest, the shoulders. And really allow that out breath to be released. Maybe even in a big sigh, just to really let go. We find when we are under pressure or in a stressful situation, we often hold our breath. It's part of our fight-flight response to not be seen and heard. So it's really important to focus on keeping our breath moving in these times and to give our brain the oxygen it needs to know everything's okay. And in this moment of stillness, you can also perhaps just focus on what you can hear around you if your eyes are closed. There may be some traffic nearby, or some birds, or some background noise. And know that whenever you do these exercises of mindfulness, it's simply about bringing your awareness to the present time without judgment and allowing whatever is to just be there. Okay, nice deep breath now and bring yourself back to the space with us as we allow our eyes to open and be fully present again. So in having conversations this week with people who are both working from home and still working in their organisations, we've been checking in with them to see what's working and what's not working. And the kinds of things that are working really well for people are establishing a routine or a rhythm. So the really important thing about establishing a routine is it helps us when we are anxious, helps our body to come back to that state of calm. We know we can have a routine and follow it. We know when we get to the end of the day that we've had some things that we've achieved because we've been following a routine. It gives us a sense of safety. So it's really important to find a way to create a routine of some sort, whether you've got children that are home from school now, whether it be just you by yourself or with your pet or a partner, whatever way you are working or living, find a routine, create a plan for the day. And it's not about being rigidly connected to it, but about knowing that there's some safety in that routine. And finding a new rhythm for this time, this temporary time, is really important. And add some things to your routine that are good for your well-being. We'll have a look at that a bit later as well. Other things that people are finding that are working really well for them is getting that physical movement, that physical activity, going around the block before lunch or after lunch for a walk, stretching the legs, doing some home-based yoga sessions, just keeping the body moving, because when we change our physical place or our physical state, we change our mind as well. So just really encouraging everybody to have what they need in their stress relief kits and add what they need to keep the resources building up for our well-being. And then there's what's not working. I've got a snow dome here that I'm shaking up, and really that's kind of like what's going on. And as I look at it, it's actually from New York City, and I'm thinking about everybody in New York City at the moment and in New York generally that are handling a mega dose of this crisis and trying to work out how to face that. So this shake up is what's going on for everybody, and the pieces are not settling yet, and they're just needing a bit of calm. So what's not working for people is that this has all been shaken up, that their usual routine's been shaken up. Any cracks that they might have had in their well-being plan have perhaps been magnified. And so it's even more important for us now to focus on what it is that we can do for our well-being. The pressures, the assumptions we're making about what people are expecting of us, the lack of time to self, the feeling exposed or seeing each other in a different way. I heard a funny guy the other day talking about how intimidated he was hearing his wife talk like she talks in her Zoom meetings to her colleagues. He said, wow, I'm so glad she doesn't talk like that at home, because that's really scary. So our masks are coming off. People are seeing us for who we are in different parts of our life when normally they wouldn't see that because we'd be at work. So there's all kinds of different demands, increased demands cognitively as we deal with all the uncertainty, increased demands for communication. I know that for Wayne and I, so much more that we've had to talk through and work through that normally we wouldn't, because we'd just be doing our own thing a bit more. And a bit of morality fatigue, which is interesting, deciding whether it's okay to go to the shops or not. Understanding, whether we can go out and have a coffee or catch up with people, or how we do that, how we get around our life. Lots of little things. There's no real playbook for this at the moment. So they're some of the things that are not working for people. And in a way, we need to take a big breath and write ourselves a permission slip. A big permission slip, and that permission slip is about maybe not having our act together, dropping the expectation that we have it all perfectly sorted for the moment. Maybe a permission slip even to redesign our life, to recreate a rhythm and a routine that works for our well-being and works for the new situation we find ourselves in. Throw the other one out and bring in a new one. And maybe how you schedule your life, how you use your time is going to be different. Maybe you're going to find yourself being with family or people that are in your house during the day and working at night. Whatever it is for you, see if you can renegotiate with yourself what are the things that are really important and what are the things that maybe need to take a back seat right now or could be reframed. So as we rethink about how we're going to manage our way or navigate our way through this new challenge that faces us, perhaps we can reframe the problem and see it as an opportunity and see how we can come up with some new answers by making new choices about the kinds of things that are not working for us. So we can stretch the margins maybe and find a different way to navigate our way through. So I'll just hand you back to Wayne now to give us some thoughts about that. Thanks, Wayne.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to recap very quickly on the responsibility model that we looked at in the last webinar. And if you can see it on your screen there, there's 3 circles. There's the things that happen to us, the way we respond to them, and the outcomes that we eventually get. And you'll notice that in the green circle in the middle, we have a choice about how we respond. So responsibility is our ability to respond to what happens to us. Initially, we'll have the possibly the fight-flight response or the fight-flight-freeze response to a threat or a perceived threat. But eventually, if we're able to manage that through mindfulness techniques or breathing or just asking ourselves some simple questions about whether this is a real threat or a perceived threat, then we can move to a more constructive response. So some of the things that we can do are to look at our circle of influence, the things that we can control. And in the current crisis, some of the things we can control are really related to whether we focus on our survival needs, get them handled, do our best to connect with others, to look at what is the value we can bring to the world despite the fact that we may not be working at the moment, or we might have changed our working situation. What can we learn? How can we adapt? And how can we help others? And that just helps to pull us up out of fear, more into the compassion space. And the other circle of influence that we have is how we think. So I'm going to hand back to Gab now to talk about thinking and reframing our thinking. And then I'll come back and talk about working from home and some of the things that you can do there. Over to you, Gab.
Thanks, Wayne. Yes, I think it's really important to understand that we are not what we are thinking. And that might seem like an unusual thing to say, but it is the truth. You know, we are more than our jumbled up thoughts. Sometimes our thoughts seem to be in charge. So it's important for us to be able to observe our thoughts and to be aware of when we might be caught up in some of these common thinking traps that I've got written down here for you. So the ones on the left, jumping to conclusions, is a pretty common one. Overgeneralizing, so making it all pervasive, whatever's going on, or instead of just picking one thing that we can do something about. Mind reading, catastrophizing, they're all common to many people, and it's really important that we are aware of whether we might be falling into some of those thinking traps because we might have done a bit of a lid flip. We talked about flipping the lid last week and exposing our emotional self rather than having our rational self in charge at the time. So one of the really important things we can do if we find ourselves in some of these thinking traps is to just slow down. And it's the mindfulness component of our practices that's going to help us to be better at being aware of these thinking traps and just recognizing them, not judging them, but just being aware of them. So slowing down is a really important thing and is what is needed right now. So slowing down and making time and making space for good quality communication. Sometimes, I don't know if you found it, when we get excited or nervous or anxious, we are too quick with our speaking and we almost speak in an abbreviated form. So right now, maybe we need to remember to slow down with our communication with others and not to communicate when we flipped our lid, when we're in an emotional state, but to really listen to each other and to observe what's going on to the best of our ability, and perhaps just say, I can see that you're feeling overwhelmed at the moment. Let me know what I can do to help you, instead of justifying what our position is or why we acted the way we did. So just, I understand, or I get you, or I hear you. Those kinds of phrases are going to really help. Asking for a redo, can we go back and start that again? Can we do this, whatever it is, conversation? Can we do this conversation at another time? We've even had to do that while we've been recording this morning, because there is a lot happening and we've had to think, okay, that didn't kind of come out the way I wanted. And in life, sometimes we need to be able to go, pause, let's just go back and start that conversation again, because I wasn't really listening to you. My mind was on something else. And even when we do that, the honesty and the vulnerability of that is really valuable in keeping our connection with others, which is so important at the moment. So sometimes we might need to perhaps dial up a few of the values that are important for us. So a few that I've outlined here that is really important to look at is, how can we be more compassionate? As Wayne said on that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, bringing compassion in when we can not be in fear but come in from a place of compassion is really useful. Bring that value to the front of our mind and our hearts. Compassion for ourselves is partly what I mean when I say give ourselves permission not to have our act together fully. or have compassion for ourselves in that we put our needs first, our well-being needs first. Maybe it's easier to bring that to others than it is to bring that to ourselves sometimes. But if we don't put that oxygen mask on ourselves and have compassion for ourselves, then we won't be able to come from that place for others for very long. Patience, again, very similar to compassion, being patient, giving ourselves time, and giving ourselves time to readjust to this new change, this new normal, not expecting perfection just yet. We've got our L plates on, or maybe our P plates on. Forgiveness, and that is a really, really big F word, and not always easy to do from the beginning. But when we're talking about forgiveness, we're talking about letting go of the thing that has hurt us, having the conversation and then letting it go. It does more for us than it does perhaps for the other person. It's about not having it in the way of our thinking and our feeling. If there was mistakes made, which there are going to be mistakes made, but you just clarify, what could we have done differently? How can we do that differently next time? How can we learn from this? Maybe it was a communication breakdown or a set of assumptions that weren't correct. And the fourth one that I think is showing up at the moment and showing up online and showing up in people's behavior is really knowing that gratitude is so vital. The gratitude we have for our current situation. So many studies have shown that when we are in a space of gratitude, it changes our chemical state. It shifts us out of that fight-flight response and immediately into a place of compassion, and it improves our well-being. So some of the things that we can dial up, if you like, around this is to take a moment either at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day as part of our routine to reflect on what it is that we're grateful for, maybe 3 things that we're grateful for. And maybe to get better at expressing that out loud to the people that we have around us, as we have perhaps more time indoors with the people that we live with. Maybe we need to dial up that gratitude and that reflection of what we are grateful for as we move through. So there's a couple of things for you to bear in mind and to perhaps bring to the front of your being while we're going through this process. And Wayne's going to go through some really useful ideas on how we can bring the best of ourselves out while we are in this new normal. Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Forgive me for showing a few other slides that I'm now showing in the wrong order. So we're still getting the hang of this Zoom thing. Working from home is quite a steep learning curve for a lot of us, and using new technology to do the things that we would normally do in a real live situation is one of the challenges that I'm dealing with at the moment. So hopefully you can see that slide there. This is a part of a poster that we've put together for people who are working from home. Now, I know not a lot of you, or sorry, not all of you will be working from home. However, even when other people are working from home and some people are still in the workplace, there's still quite a difference between that and having the full workforce there working together in normal conditions. So we're all having to do some adjustments. And these are things that you could also, well, they could also apply while you're working in the workplace. So they're probably still quite relevant to anyone who's either working in the office or at a workplace at the moment or working at home. So we put a poster together and there's 6 parts to it. I'm just going to show you the first half of it and then the second half. The first one is there, you'll see at the top, is self-care. And that's really, I guess, a bit like putting your own oxygen mask on first. And one of the things that I noticed, I didn't tell this story last time in our first seminar, but one of the things that happened to me a few years ago was I lost my voice for about a year and I had to learn how to talk again. And sometimes when I'm under stress, my voice goes on me, or my brain starts to get quite frazzled because I'm trying to control my voice and deal with new technology and remember what I was going to say. So I'm somewhat challenged at the moment. And so the more I look after my self-care, the more able I am to respond to that challenge. So one of the first things that's really important is to stay hydrated. So drinking water on a regular basis throughout the day is really important to keep your brain functioning. Moving your body regularly. If we're sitting at a screen all day, that's not really good for our health. They say sitting is the new smoking, so we really need to get up and move around at least every half hour or so, even if you're just stretching in the chair. Making sure that we prepare some nutritious snacks for the day, maybe some nuts, some muesli bars, an apple, a banana, something nutritious so that we're not just eating junk food all day. Often when we go for chocolate bars, it gives us a sugar hit and we feel like we're able to think more clearly, but then the body produces a lot of insulin to try and deal with that sugar, and then we have a hypo where our blood sugar drops quite suddenly and we start to feel really snoozy. So if you have a lot of coffee and chocolate, it'll keep you stimulated, but then you have to keep having it, and it also dehydrates you, having a lot of caffeine. So making sure that you're hydrated, you're moving, you're eating the right sorts of things, taking some time for mindfulness. And that might be just sitting at your desk with your eyes closed, breathing like we did at the beginning of this session, or it could be that you go for a walk around the block, or you do some Tai Chi or some yoga or some meditation. And we're going to be sharing with you lots of ideas about mindfulness in the coming weeks. Taking breaks for rest, reflection, fresh air, regular breaks will really, really help. And minimising media. And what we mean by that is we're being bombarded at the moment with a lot of emails and posts and webinar information and lots of stuff around the virus. So if we get overloaded with that, it really can steer our thinking in the wrong direction or in a direction that's not helpful. So we do need to stay informed, but we want to try and minimise that so that it works for us rather than against us. Connection is the next one. And that's really about communicating and being present with family and also with your partner. If you have a close partner, to be communicating. And Gabrielle and I have really had to ramp up our communication, and it's sometimes been done under pressure in the last few weeks. So we have to keep communicating about how to communicate constructively. Checking in with friends is really important. A lot of you might have ramped up your frequency of being in touch with friends now that you're home a lot. And it's really important to check in with each other so that the social isolation doesn't start to cause a lot of mental health problems. Scheduling video meetings with your work team and your customers so that you're staying in touch with them as much as you can, and letting people know when you're available so that you're setting some boundaries around your time and you're not being interrupted all of the time. I'll come back to that a little more in a moment, but the balance one really is very similar. It's making sure you've got time for work and for family, and you're not just working really long hours, which it's easy to do working from home. Work and play and learning and solo time. If you can break up your day so that you're doing the work at a particular time, you've got time for play and fun. You might do some reading, and you might have some time for yourself, which I like to do in the mornings. Obviously, planning is important, and you need to make some time for that. Some people like to do it in the morning, some like to do it at the end of the day for the next day. So as long as you've got a plan in place, that's going to help you to stay on track. Also, time for when you're going to communicate, which might be the scheduling of the meetings or letting people know when you're available, as I said before. And obviously time for the different tasks that you need to do, and time for rest and renewal. So they're the first three, and you'll notice they're mostly around people factors. The other three are more about the tasks and getting your work done. And one of the most important things we find is making sure that our work area is uncluttered and organised. Sometimes if you're doing a lot of things on the run, your desk might look more like a tourist attraction rather than being tidy and organised. And that just helps to reduce the cognitive load on your brain, because it sees a nice, clean, tidy area and everything is where you need it to be. It's preferable if you can have an outside view and some natural light. So we have a skylight in the roof here, and we have a window looking out onto the garden, out the front and the back. You may not have the luxury of having your designated space near a window, but the more natural light you can have in, the better. It just helps your brain to function more effectively. And if you can set up an atmosphere that's calm and energising, that's really, really helpful as well. So minimising distractions if you can. The purple one there is structure, and that's really putting all those things together that we've been talking about and making sure you have blocks of time for various things during the day. So to give you an example, I like to do most of my self-care is done in the morning because that works for me. Gabrielle's more of a morning person for work, so she tends to do more of that in the morning, but she also gets time to walk the dog and have a relaxing breakfast. So self-care through the day, having a routine for that, planning and prioritising so that you're doing the most important and most urgent things first, and then making sure that you are not spending a lot of your time on busy work and things that aren't really productive. So we'll come back to that in a minute, and I'll show you another model about time management. Creating space in your day is really important as well for reflection, rather than just going from one thing to the other. And structure around communication. When are you going to check your emails rather than responding to them all of the time? You might have a specific time during the day. So I tried to have a quick look in the morning and then in the middle of the day and towards the end of the day. But sometimes if you know you've got people wanting to contact you, you may have to check your email more regularly. Rest and re-energising breaks, we've talked about that already, and having a end of day ritual where you can move from the working situation to getting home, either virtually or in real life. I might just throw to Gab for the end of day ritual, because I know, Gabrielle, you always trying to steer me in that direction because I have a bit of a challenge with that. So would you like to comment on that?
Sure. It's really important that we can change our brain's needs and help ourselves to defrag or declutter our mind as we move into a new phase of our day. So the transition times are really, really important. We know when we're doing one set of tasks or one lot of focus and moving into another lot of focus. So especially, we've been working from home for almost 20 years and raising a family at the same time. And it's really respectful. I think it's part of a value of respect to all know when we're starting work and when we're finishing work. And we know that when we've shut that door or closed our computer or done a ritual, like we tend to have biscuits and cheese or a dip or something at the end of the day to signify that we're not working anymore, but we're now in family time. So whatever it is, whether it be taking the dog for a walk at the end of the day or walking yourself around the block, we've heard of some families getting dressed for work and school, even though they're schooling from home. And at the beginning of the day, they walk out the door with their school clothes on, then they come back and do their schoolwork. And then at the end of the day, they walk around the block and then they come back and take their school clothes off and put their play clothes on. And in a way, we could do an adult version of that, you know, getting dressed for work. And even though it's nice to work in your PJs, I think from my experience, when you get dressed for work, you do a different type of work, a different focus of work. And the same at the end of the day, you know, put our jammies on or our trackies on and change our headset, our mindset.
Thanks, Gab. That's not really one of my strengths, so I figured it was better for Gab to talk about that. The last one there in red, sorry, Gab?
Yet is a good word to put in there.
Up until now. The last one there is in red is focus, and that if we're doing all of the other things, you know, having good structure, the environment is set up well, we're taking care of ourselves, and all of those things, then focus is a lot easier. So it's probably the key one there is setting clear boundaries and avoiding distractions, sticking to your priorities. And one of the big distractions is notifications from social media and your phone going off and emails going ding and all that kind of stuff. So turning off your notifications, perhaps having times during the day where your phone is on silent so you can really focus on what you're doing, because you can always get back to people, especially if you let people know when are the times they can best contact you. Some people actually put that on their emails or their messages where they say, you know, I'll be focusing on a task at this time. You can get me at 1 o'clock. So the more you can communicate around your boundaries, about your boundaries, the more likely it is that you won't be distracted. Having good hydration, as I said earlier, healthy snacks and movement and stretch breaks is really part of that, keeping you focused, so that your mind doesn't start getting really blurry, and then it's really hard to think, especially later in the day after lunch. Sometimes it might be worth having a little siesta. That's what I like to do, have a power nap when I start dozing off, and just helps me to be fresh for the last part of the day. And the other thing is using your most productive time of day wisely. So as I said before, my most productive time is generally in the afternoon, late afternoon, and that's why I sometimes have a challenge with finishing by a certain time, because I really just start to get into the rhythm in mid-afternoon, whereas Gabrielle tends to be way more productive in the morning. So you have to work out what works for you, and you may need to discuss that with other members of your family and try and find something that really works for you. So hopefully you've found those 6 areas, including task and people priorities, to be helpful. And it's hard to do all of them really well, but if you can focus on one thing, maybe this week, and the next focus on structure, and the next focus on self-care, you'll start to form some really good habits and routines. The last thing I wanted to talk about before I hand back to Gab is how we manage our time. And many of you may have seen this before. It's really quite a simple model. We've got high urgency items in the left-hand vertical column and low urgency on the right. So the low urgency ones don't have big consequences if you're able to delay them. But if you do neglect, especially the B priorities, they will become more urgent. And then in terms of importance, we've got the high importance ones at the top and the lower importance ones at the bottom. And importance, you could say, is related to the consequences of not doing them. So the A box is really the really high priorities, the ones that are highly important, big consequences, high urgency, we need to get them done today. And you may only really have time for 1 or 2 things in a typical day. So maybe 1, 2, 3 high priorities, maybe 4 if you're lucky, you'll get those done. The B priorities are things such as exercise, communication, planning, learning, being organised, all of those kinds of things that help us to be more productive in the A box, we need to do in the B box and make time for them in our day. Otherwise, this A box gets really big and unwieldy, and we start to push all the B priorities out of the way, and we don't really do them effectively. That's a slide we're going to come back to. This is really about energy management as well, not just time management. The pink box down here on the left is high urgency, often the urgency of other people's expectations or things that come at you from left field. So curveballs, distractions, emergencies, they always come up no matter how well your day is planned. So the 4 Ds in the middle here are really the choices you have when things come up in this left-hand bottom box here, the pink box. Do you do them? In other words, are they really an A priority? You need to do them straight away, or there might be something simple, like what we call low-hanging fruit. Could you delay them? If someone calls you, can you ask them to call you back at 4? Or is there something that pops into your email box that you could do later that you suddenly get distracted by? So delaying is a good tactic. Delegating, sometimes delegating it back to the person who's trying to give it to you, or delegating, it could be, say, mowing the lawn, you delegate that to the VIP person rather than do it yourself. So sometimes we can trim a lot of time off our schedule just by delegating and delaying. And then there's obviously things that we shouldn't even put our time into. So they're the things we delete or discard. The last box is the time wasters. It'd be interesting to use this, a blank version of this for 5 days in the next week, and just write down your priorities on the left, your B priorities on the right. Write down all the distractions you've had, and write down things that you've done that you feel have been a waste of time. And that's a good way of auditing where your time's gone in a typical week. And then the last thing I'd say is that if you can trim the time wasters and get good at handling the curveballs, distractions and emergencies using the 4 Ds, then you can use that time you've saved to invest in the B priorities. And the more you do the B priorities, the self-care stuff in particular, the more likely it is that you'll be able to get efficient and effective at handling the A priorities. So it's very similar to energy management and money management. We might come back and do another webinar just on this, this concept later on, because I think it's one worth going into in more detail. But I'm going to hand you back to Gab now to cover a couple of things before we finish up. Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. Yes, it is a lot about energy management, because if we're not managing our energy, then we're not going to make the best decisions that we could, because we're going to be coming from a place where our decision making is perhaps coloured by our emotional state rather than our rational state. So managing our energy is going to really help us have the most fuel in our tank and help our resilience and build our resilience. So I think we covered a little bit about this last time, so I'm not going to go over it in a great amount of detail, but there are 4 areas that you can look at, or 4 ways of looking at managing your energy. One could be using your mind and thinking, what are the things that I like to do with my mind that help me to feel better after I've done them for half an hour or 10 minutes. It might not be a long time. It's just a bit of a change, a shift to your energy. So there's some things on the list there, some breathing, some meditation, or even just savouring the meal that you're having, or a cup of tea. So what can I do with my body? Is it moving my body? Again, the breathing is not just the mind, it's the body as well. What I eat, what I put into my body, how do I fuel my body physically? What do I do socially? And again, we know that socially at the moment we are a little challenged because we've been told to physically distance ourselves, which really has us feeling like we're having to be socially distant. Well, we can still connect with people, just not physically. And it's really important to find a way to connect with somebody, whether that be a therapeutic way, or a Zoom meeting, or phoning somebody, or even writing a letter, which is a really beautiful thing to do, because you're spending that time thinking about the person, and then they receive it and they get a chance to read it, and then you can have a conversation about that afterwards. Expressing gratitude is a way of connecting with others as well. And using our environment, I know that for me, this is a huge one. If I can shift where I am in the environment, or if I can change something about my environment, tidy it up, move some furniture around, put some oils on, put some incense on, whatever it is, that often helps me to move into a different state, a better place. So these are all ways of looking at your energy. We've got some other ways to just leave you with, and one is to look at how your sleep routine is going. So there's a few suggestions here. Again, this is a lot of information to take in, but there might be 1 or 2 hints in here that make a difference for you if sleep is an issue. It's not for everybody, but it can become an issue. So a sleep routine, pre-sleep routine, is really, really vital for us to have our body have a rhythm to it. It knows that it's going through this process. And we know that with small children, it works brilliantly. So it works for us as adults as well. Keeping our devices away before we go to bed for an hour, making sure that we're not having too much caffeine, having a tummy that's not full of food so that we can rest our gut. 12 hours is really an ideal time to have space. So if you don't eat between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m., for example, or 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., that's a really good thing for your gut, to give it time to calm down. It's actually there's so much science around this, but resting your gut gives it a chance to really improve its motility, and it gives it a chance to really look after itself and repair itself, so that it's not always working. So if I can give you some impetus to do that, I really encourage you to do that. Physical activity, we've talked about. Muted light in the evening can help our melatonin levels, our melanin levels, to be in the right place as well. Take your clock out of the bedroom if you can, so that you're not going, oh, it's only 1 o'clock, oh, it's still 2 o'clock and I haven't been to sleep. That stops the anxiety about not sleeping, which creates more not sleeping. A herbal supplement is really important. I know that I've been taking more of those lately to help myself to really bathe the nervous system and look after the nervous system, so that I'm ready for the next day, regardless of whether I'm sleeping deeply or not. And lastly, there's a few hints and tips there for you for your well-being. If your monkey mind, there's the barrel of monkeys there. If your monkey mind is going berserk because you flipped your lid and your monkey mind is in charge, then magazines sometimes are really useful. Putting essential oils on just to help the limbic system, which is the monkey mind, to calm down, or to use the oils to focus. So whatever you're wanting, you can actually use the essential oils to make a difference there. The Sleepytime Tea is fantastic as a herbal tea. It's safe for children and for adults. Anybody can use the Sleepytime Tea, but it's not contraindicated with any other medication. And a gratitude diary is a lovely thing to begin. You can do that yourself or with your family. Or even have a gratitude jar. I might speak about that at another time. So we'll leave you with those ideas. It's overwhelming to try and put them all into place at once. It's mostly about what is it that I can do that's going to work for me, and how can I let go of the things that aren't working, and how can I perhaps see things from a different perspective, so that I can come to them from a calm, mindful place and be the best person that I can be right now. I'll just pass you back to Wayne to say goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. We've really enjoyed talking with you today, and we hope that you've come across some new information, or some of the information we've shared might not be new to you, but hopefully reinforcing the things that really are helpful for people who are going through a challenging time, or working from home, trying to be more effective and efficient with what you do with your time and your energy. So really enjoyed talking with you today, and we look forward to the next session, and we'll wish you the best for this week. And if you can just pick 1 or 2 things to work on, that would be really helpful. So see you next time. Cheers.
Bye.